Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alan McGowan. I'm the chair of the Environmental Studies program here at the New School. And let me tell you how very excited we are to host you and this wonderful organization. I sing in a chorus called the New York City Labor Chorus, and we are actually singing Sunday morning at the labor rally for the march. The good news is that there is a labor rally for the march. This is the first time in my memory that labor has actually bought on to this, and by all accounts, they have bought onto it big time. We expect a pretty big crowd for the rally before the actual march takes place. I'm so excited to see everybody here. I'm so excited to see these panelists. This is just a terrific thing for us to host, and you give us, the New School, a great deal of honor by agreeing to come here and have your meeting in our auditorium. This used to be called the Tishman Auditorium, then we built another one and called that the Tishman Auditorium, but this has a long history of issues of social struggle, racial justice, and so forth taking place right here in this hall. So we are absolutely thrilled to have you here. It's my job, a pleasant job, and an honor to introduce the moderator, Faron McLurkin, who is the executive director of the Center for Third World Organizing, otherwise known as C2, which is actually the oldest racial justice organization in the country. He said it was started before he was born. So he was born yesterday, of course. So the Center is an extremely interesting and important organization. As you probably know, it's dedicated to building a social justice movement in the United States and elsewhere. This is an international panel, an international effort, and we are actually making history. The end of this week will be a phenomenal sea change, I think, in the attitude that people have towards this really important issue. Those of us who've been struggling for a long time have waited a long time for this to happen, and thanks to 350.org and a lot of other organizations, including this one, things are finally going to happen. Faron has served in practically every job in this organization I think that the organization has, so I'm not going to bore you with all of the details, but the organization has established networks around the country and around the world, and has dealt a lot with organizations like the AFL-CIO, Change to Win, Unite Here, and Workers United. My apologies for not being able to stay for the event. One thing we do around here is teach, and unfortunately I have to teach in a few minutes. So without further ado, let me welcome Faron to the podium, and let's give a big welcome to this organization. Faron, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Alan. And welcome everybody to On the Rise. Yeah. So I'm honored to be here and really excited to be part of the largest mobilization on climate change in the history of the world. Please. All right, I have to say, for the largest mobilization on climate change in the history of the world, that was not enough applause. Are y'all ready to do this? Are y'all ready? You gotta soak it in. Okay? All right, now we're getting going. Okay. There you go. So like I said, I'm really honored to be here because this really is a historic moment, right? This is going to be the largest mobilization in the history of the world, which, as activists, we don't always get a chance to be part of the biggest things that are going to happen, even in our generation. So I'm excited to host this panel because across the globe, we really are facing disastrous implications caused by climate change. From nuclear meltdowns in Japan to the domestic storms like Katrina and Sandy, climate change has really been at the heart of many of the most immediate and pressing issues people are facing right now. And I personally believe that this issue will be the defining statement on the global history of humanity. That when they look back on the history of the planet Earth and the species, the human race, that this will be the thing that we're judged by. And so, again, that's why I'm really happy to see, be part of this panel and see these folks, right? Because the good news is that gives us the chance to literally save the world, right? Like when you're a kid, right? It's like Superman, Spider-Man, we get to do it, right? If we choose to do it. So, I wanted to just say that, we have that chance, and across the globe, poor and working class people of color are at the forefront of global struggles and grassroots struggles that are not only addressing the immediate issues, but also helping to shape a vision of how we can move forward. So tonight we have 5 climate ambassadors from all over the world and 5 local activists, right, from here in New York City region. And we also have 5 days till the march. So without further ado, I wanted to start the panel, but before we do, I just want to actually ask Cindy from 350 to come up to talk a little bit about why folks are here and about the work that 350 has done, 350.org, in organizing this.
Thank you, Faron. So just quickly, I think everyone knows we have this huge mobilization taking place in a few days, and 350 and Avaz are 2 of the big anchors that are making it possible. Why we are so honored this evening to have some folks here from around the world is that, as Faron was saying, what's happening here in the streets of New York City is one part of a big global movement, because we know the change that we need to see affects everyone in the world. And we're really thrilled that there are 14, we're calling them the Global Climate Ambassadors. We're reclaiming the UN's language. We can have our own ambassadors, the people's ambassadors, who are here from 10 countries for the month of September. And tonight, 4 of them are part of this conversation with really forefront activists here in New York City. And trying to help lift up those global stories and international voices and help amplify our movement and this building of global solidarity. And just in case you don't know, although we'll have the biggest demonstration here in New York City and in the world, there are 2,200 other events and demonstrations taking place in 150 countries around the world at the same time as we'll be here in New York. So when we say it's a global movement and the biggest thing ever, as Faron said, it really is. So we'll see you then.
All right. All right. Thanks to 350. Basically, we're going to start the discussion. So I'm just going to go down the list starting from the left. If folks could sort of do a brief introduction of themselves and why they're here and the work that they do. So, Goksen.
Hello everyone, I am Goksen from Turkey. Actually, my organization was founded in 2005, and we were working on the climate change. The first time that we went on the streets, actually we were hoping at most 100 people to be on the streets on climate change issue, but there were 4,000 in Istanbul and 2,000 in Izmir and 1,000 people in Ankara. So we said that, okay, people know climate change because they feel the impacts of climate change in their daily lives. So we started working more on the issue, and we saw that in 2009, 2007, 2008, and 2009, we had the huge climate demonstrations and the big public pressure on the government. And in 2009, Turkish government signed Kyoto Protocol. So that was a very, very big moment for us, because it was the first time that after a public march, actually, 3 ministers get in front of the cameras and they said publicly, okay, because of the public pressure, we are considering signing an international agreement. And I don't know how much you're familiar with Turkey, but Turkey is a little bit in the Mediterranean, a little bit in the Caucasus, a little bit in the Middle East region. So we're in the middle of everything. And as you know, probably, this region is also declared by the scientists one of the most vulnerable regions in the Mediterranean region. So we are feeling the impacts of climate change, but at the same time we are causing climate change. We are one of the reasons of climate change. I mean, Turkey as the country, not we as the people who live in the country. Turkey is one of the reasons of the climate change because right now Turkey has more than 80 coal power plant projects. And we were trying to make a national campaign, but it is not possible to make a national campaign. So every people, actually, in every village almost in Turkey, people are struggling with the coal issue in their daily lives because they are feeling health impacts, their land is drying because of the impacts of climate change and also the impacts of coal ashes. So there is a huge local mobilization right now in Turkey. What I want to add before I finish, Turkey is one of the, since 4 years actually, Turkey is the highest emission increasing country in the world. So we are still aiming to build 80 new coal power plants in addition to this. And I want to add before I pass the mic to Isso, that on this Saturday, Turkey is not a Sunday demonstration country. We are doing picnics on Sunday. So we are going to make our demonstration on Saturday to have more people on the streets. But on Saturday, actually, all the local people from different local struggles, from coal struggles, from big dam struggles, they will be in Istanbul and they will be in Ankara. They will be on the streets to tell their struggles, that what they are trying to do in the local level. This is very important for us because if you are in a small village in Turkey, you are actually, when you look at from a little bit broader approach, you are in the middle of nowhere and you feel yourself alone. So being here is very important for us, and having this International Day of Action around climate change is very important for us as the people who feels the impact of climate change and as the people who are struggling against coal, which is the biggest reason of climate change. And I want to thank you all for giving this opportunity to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just before I begin, can I ask any one of you know where the Pacific Island is? Just put your hands up. Thank you. So I can see that most of the people didn't know where the Pacific Island is because we're really tiny, small little islands. So they call us the small island state. So first of all, my name is Isso, and I am the local 350 coordinator for the national campaign which we're doing back in Vanuatu, which is part of the Melanesian Group of Islands in the Pacific, and which is also part of the 350 Pacific team. So I work with the South Pacific Community, which is the SPC, and a German Technical Cooperation Organization called GIZ, and they're coping with climate change in the Pacific Island region. So just before I begin, I just want to thank the 350.org for the invitation for me to be here to share some of the real experiences that we're facing back in the Pacific Ocean, and also the organizers who organized this event for us to be part of this big global movement, especially the march on Sunday. So first of all, I would like to share a little bit of you guys with some of the real challenges that we're facing back in the Pacific. So actually, one of the biggest problems that we're facing in the Pacific Islands is sea level rise. So as I've said, we're really tiny little islands, and most of our islands are low-lying islands, and we're facing really this big issue of sea level rise. And another thing that I would like to share with you guys, which we're really being challenged with, is the ocean acidification. And this is one of the, we used to call it the silent killer. Most of our reefs that were depending on getting the fish and some of these local meats that were surviving back in the Pacific, it's really getting, we're losing some of these marine species. And also we're experiencing this new marine species called the crown of thorns. And it's killing our reefs, and we're really suffering from this big, we used to call it the big monster. So this is one of the things. So another thing I would like to share with you guys, some of the challenges that we're facing in terms of these impacts of climate change is the what we call the El Nino and La Nina, which is the changing of the real climatic conditions of some extensions of these periods of drought and also floodings. So this is some of the issues that we're really struggling and we're really being challenged of these negative impacts of climate change. So what we do is we really, we're not that we were the least, one of the least developed countries, and we know that we're least contributors of gas emissions, but we are the front line of climate change. So for 20 years, our government have been, negotiating with this international government to address or to respond to this issue of climate change after 20 years ago, but we didn't have any response from the international government, especially the United Nations. And what we do is, for the last 2 years, 350 just came introduced into our islands and gave us some motivation, some opportunities that this is not just the government. This is also the people. This is also the youth. So I'm here representing the youth as a youth member in the Pacific Islands. It's really a great opportunity, and I'm really also excited to be part of this big climate march, to stand in solidarity with all these other global ambassadors and all these people coming out from everywhere in the world, to show world leaders that we don't want to talk about the impacts of climate change. We want action, and we want to do something in response urgently to these impacts of climate change. So this is some of the things that we've been working with, and I just want to let you know some of the activities that we have been working with since
Wonderful.
the last 3 days.
Oh, thank you, Isso. And thank you, Vaishali.
My name is Vaishali Patil. I am from India. I am coming from that region of Konkan, the state of Maharashtra, which is known as the California of India. This region is known as the California of India because of the biodiversity hotspot, because of the greenery what we have, because of the endemic species what we have in that range. And it's a beautiful region of mine, where one side we have the Arabian Sea coastal belt, and parallel to that there is a Western Ghat. I must say, from 1992, when whole this LPG phenomena, liberalization, privatization and globalization started, we could started seeing the impact of this LPG in our rural area, as the special economic zone started coming in. Number of coal projects started coming in. The number of mining projects have been sanctioned. If I can just talk about Konkan region of Maharashtra state, it's just small narrow strip of 400 kilometers in which 23 special economic zones have been sanctioned, 19 power projects have been in pipeline, just getting sanctioned, various sanctions. If altogether we count how many power projects would be, it will be 55,000 megawatts power projects. In the same belt, there is going to be 56 mining leases have been sanctioned, and number of multinationals coming in on the name of privatization, on the name of development, so-called development. So the whole struggle from last few years has been, if these are the developmental projects, whose development these projects are really bringing? And people are questioning, people are fighting tooth and nail, day and night. The people who have been fighting are the fisher folks, people who have been fighting are the marginalized farmers, the people who have been fighting are the indigenous people, and the people who have been fighting, they are not only fighting to save their land, but they have questioned to the World Bank, they have questioned to the US, they have questioned to the whole global economy, and they have a question to the whole political decision makers. And we are fighting against not only the largest project in Konkan, not only largest in Maharashtra, not only largest proposed nuclear power plant in India, but perhaps the largest proposed nuclear power station in Jaitapur, which is going to be of 9,900 megawatt. And all of us, we know that after Fukushima accident, that everybody is wanting to get rid of the nuclear power stations. And our government is opting for it. And unfortunately, among these 125 countries, our representative from India is not going to take part. And precisely for this, when we have come here as a global ambassador, and people are asking, how do you look at this march, which is going to be historical? We feel this is not going to be a historical march only for US, but we are looking at this whole process and the impact of this process on the decision-making, political decision-making, because this is just a hope for us. This is just a space where we can breathe. We feel that we will be able to breathe. So this march is a hope for us. This march is a breath for us. And this is something, a bright future for us. And this is how I would just say that this is precisely for that I'm here to witness this whole historical process. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Vaishali. Okay, Juan.
Gracias, Faron. Soy Juan Pedro Chan. Soy representante de la Central Unitaria de Trabajadores del Perú y también soy integrante de la comisión organizadora de la Cumbre de los Pueblos del Perú, que se va a realizar en diciembre y que está convocando a la marcha global del 10 de diciembre. Marcha por justicia climática y derechos humanos que ojalá, así como ahora en Nueva York, no solamente podamos realizar en Lima, sino en diferentes ciudades del mundo.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Juan Pedro Chan. I come from Peru. I'm a union leader from the Central Workers Union in Peru, and I'm also a member of the organizing committee of the People's Climate Summit that will take place in Lima, Peru, in December. And I've come here to share also about a mobilization that we're organizing in Lima on December 10th. That will be also a march on climate justice and human rights. And I'm here to connect the march and to also see if we can make that moment, the moment here and the moment in Peru, a global moment.
Vengo del Perú, país en el que el petróleo, la minería y la pesquería son los elementos fundamentales de su economía, pero también son contribuyentes principales a los impactos del cambio climático en el país.
I come from Peru, a country whose economy is based on oil extraction, mining, and fishing, which also contribute to climate change.
Por lo mismo,
Un minuto.
estamos impulsando con mucha fuerza la organización de la Cumbre de los Pueblos y de la movilización del 10 de diciembre.
And that is why we're promoting the organization of this mobilization that will take place on December 10th.
Creemos que estos eventos que tendrán como sede Lima son también muy importantes para el mundo y deben de recibir el respaldo de todas las organizaciones, instituciones, activistas a nivel global.
Similarly to the events that are taking place here in New York, we believe that the events that are being organized in Lima should get the support of the global community of all the organizations around the world.
Y estamos en Nueva York para respaldar, para ser parte de una marcha que debe de ser histórica este septiembre.
And we're here in New York to also support and endorse this march that should and must be historic.
Porque esta no es una marcha, no solo es una marcha, como responsabilidad y como orgullo de los pueblos norteamericanos, de los jóvenes estudiantes y ciudadanos aquí presentes, sino es de todos los pueblos y países y razas y colores y voluntades del mundo.
Because this is not a march only that belongs here in the US, it's a march that belongs to everyone in the world, to everyone from every community, every race, every path of life.
Y esta marcha es la antesala de la marcha que convocamos al 10 de diciembre, y esta marcha del 10 de diciembre es la antesala de las marchas que habrán en París y que tienen que haber en todos los países a lo largo de la historia en esta coyuntura.
And this march is the start of a march that will continue, and we will march in Lima, and we will march next year in Paris, and so on, because this has to continue over time.
Necesitamos movilizar y concientizar a todos los ciudadanos del mundo. Salvemos el planeta, viva la marcha global.
We need to mobilize all citizens in the world. We need to save the planet. Thank you very much.
Wow. Peace and blessings. My name is Ray Figueroa. Ray Figueroa Reyes Jr. That's the full speech. I come to you from the local front of the climate justice struggle. I work here in New York City. I wear a couple of hats, one as a program director with a small community-based environmental organization in the South Bronx known as Friends of Brook Park, where on a daily basis we work with young people in the community through we engage them in something known as the Youth Community Farm Project. And I'm very proud to say that we engage because of the broader environment of the community, an environment of depression-era levels of unemployment and poverty. We have a lot of youth that are experiencing different levels of psychological and social violence within their communities, and the Youth Community Farm Project at the Community Garden of Brook Park offers a healing space where young people can cultivate not only fresh fruits and vegetables for their families and their communities, but in the process cultivate a sense of personal efficacy and agency, and over time have that cultivation redound into a sense of civic engagement and social responsibility, an enduring sense of social responsibility. I also am president of the New York City Community Garden Coalition. The work I do there is primarily advocacy work on behalf of all community gardens in the New York City area. I work regionally throughout the city, the state, and regionally to bring about greater regulatory protections for community gardens. Here in New York City, there's no protection there are no legal protections for permanence of community gardens. Community gardens are significant because in the environment that the socioeconomic environment that I just alluded to, they offer a place where people, communities, folk can come together and be productively engaged in a way that is self-determining, in a way that honors their sense of human dignity in the process. This is very, very, very important. And so community gardens and community gardeners are actually in a very peaceful fight to maintain the sustainability of their communities and do so in a way that also promotes resilience at the local level. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Peace.
Good evening. My name's Amanda Lugg, and I'm the Advocacy Director at African Services, a community-based NGO up in Harlem. It's a direct service organization where we serve the African and Caribbean immigrant community with a range of social services, but our focus is on health. In a professional sense, and directly speaking, I have absolutely nothing to do with climate change whatsoever. And the reason that I'm marching on Sunday is because I'm telling everyone who knows me that I am marching. And those people that know me know that I'm an HIV/AIDS activist. They know I'm an immigration activist. And those who know me really well know that I'm an animal rights activist. The reason I'm marching is I want them to ask me why I'm marching, to be able to explain the link, the link to them all, and the reasons why we all need to be marching for climate change on Sunday.
Hi, my name is Thanu Yakupitiyage, and I'm the communications coordinator at the New York Immigration Coalition. The New York Immigration Coalition is an umbrella policy and advocacy organization. We work with over 200 different community organizations, including labor and faith organizations and governmental organizations on the city, state, and national level to really promote immigrant rights, and this is in pertaining to immigration policy on the national level. You know, we push really hard for immigration reform, and we work on the state and city level to support immigrants in terms of civic engagement, health, community development, education, and we do a lot of work with both undocumented community members as well as immigrants at large. And I'm really here today to talk about the connections between immigration and migration and climate change, because I think that's something that I've noticed, of course, in our work at the Immigration Coalition, is oftentimes all of our movements get really siloed, and we end up really just focusing on what it is that we're doing. So for example, we've been working really hard to push immigration reform on the national level, and this is really an opportunity to think about how that connects to climate change. So it's really great to be on this panel with so many activists from around the world to be really talking about the intersectional impacts of migration and health and all of the work that we're doing together.
Buenas noches, good evening. I'm Diane Mejia. I'm a woman, and a mother, and a sister. I am a wife. I am an immigrant. I was undocumented. But the most important thing, I'm a human being. And I'm very honored to be here tonight, share with you human beings for all around the world. And speaking in these beautiful accents, but at the end of the day, we're here because we care about other human beings and we care about our communities. I'm a member of Wind of the Spirit, a grassroots organization based in New Jersey, but also we do some work here in New York. And we are mainly a group of people who has been come together to struggle for human rights and struggle for people's rights. And the important for us is, and for me, from my own experience, to be an immigrant that basically was displaced from my country, to marching this coming Sunday, and the reason why I'm here tonight share with you is because we definitely need to come together in building a better communities and forget about borders and forget about countries and forget about politics, and in one day come together and celebrate our humanity as a brothers and sisters of Mother Earth. And it's something very different from us. I'm a peasant, and for peasants, Mother Earth give us something to eat. And for me, Mother Earth tonight is crying because we are destroying them, we are abusing her, and by abusing her, we are abusing people, and we force people to emigrate. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carlina Rivera. I was born and raised in a very small town called the Lower East Side. It's a place that I've been for many, many years, and I actually am very blessed to be the Director of Programs and Services at an organization called Good Old Lower East Side Goals. And we work on a number of issues, affordable housing predominantly, but land use, economic equality, and mostly in environmental justice as well, and how it's related to every single topic, education, survey. All of the work that we do is really all related to environmental justice. So I'm marching for low-income communities, for low-income families. I'm marching for people of color, and I'm marching for the seniors that I work with every day, mostly Spanish-speaking, who have a voice and who will be marching with us on Sunday. So I'm I'm feeling very good and grateful in being with this panel, and thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank everybody for the introductions. And I just wanted to personally say, like Alan said in the introduction, that the Center for Third World Organizing is an organization that really focuses on racial justice and issues affecting people of color. And I'm really glad that folks highlighted the linkages between immigration and climate change, because immigration, as we all know, has been one of the most debated subjects in this country and one of the things that has really changed the political terrain, but really has focused on individual immigrants and sort of the morality of the act, and really hasn't talked at all about why people are here, which is directly connected to global climate change. So really glad that sort of came out, and I would encourage all of the speakers I think one of the things we want to explore here is the intersectionality of the issues that people are concerned about in the room, that your local communities and constituencies are concerned with. So how do climate change issues affect or are related to the labor movement? How are they related to immigration? How are they related to other popular struggles? So we're going to move now into the question and answer. So I'm going to ask questions of each one of the panelists. I'm going to ask each panelist one question, and we're looking for an answer about 3 minutes, okay? So the first question is for Ray Figueroa. I have to give you a disclaimer that I'm from Brooklyn, so we never got the chance to go to the Bronx. And we always think we're the best borough, but I've heard of all the organizations in the march that the contingent from the Bronx may be the strongest and best organized. So I think a lot of people might be surprised by that. And I wanted to ask, what has allowed you to organize so successfully, and how will you build on the momentum that you've already created after the march?
Well, thank you. Thank you for that question. The Bronx, some demographics, very cursorily speaking, the Bronx is the poorest congressional district in the United States, all right? The Bronx has the dubious distinction of having probably the highest asthma rate, the South Bronx in particular, the highest asthma rate in the United States, 8 times the national average. The Bronx has never recovered from the Great Depression of the 30s, okay? There are literally pockets where in excess of 30, 40, upwards of 50% unemployment, census blocks. We have something in the Bronx known as $1 million blocks. How many of you are familiar with the term $1 million blocks? By a show of hands, okay. There's a project out of Columbia that did this project called justice mapping. $1 million blocks is not a real estate term. It actually refers to a given city block, and on that block there are, let's say, a given number of 5 individuals that are incarcerated in the state of New York. The cost of incarceration adds up to $1 million. The Bronx has one of the highest concentrations as a result of the greatest concentration of public housing, okay, of $1 million blocks. So we're dealing with a massive incarceration issue in the Bronx. So what does this mean from an organizing perspective? We are literally fighting oppression. It's either fight or die. I work with an organization called Nos Quedamos, which means we stay. where there is no flight, there's only fight. We have no other place to go. That's why community gardens are so significant. But generally speaking, because of these really, really in-your-face, egregious demographics of the Bronx, folks have assumed the sense of moral incumbency to really organize and to really fight. We're really fighters. So in the Bronx, out of the Bronx, we have a campaign against attenuating the production of asthma by stopping a company called Fresh Direct from locating its 10,000 plus garage operation in the South Bronx, which is already choking as a result of the transportation infrastructure, the Triborough, the Major Deegan, the Bruckner, the Cross Bronx. The vehicular truck traffic not only makes your eyes sting in the summertime, but it literally will make you choke. And so it's really a campaign where folks are saying they have drawn the line and said, you know, enough of this. We're going to draw the line and we're going to fight. So there's an active lawsuit. I oversee, speaking about Brooklyn, I actually oversee community gardens all over the city in terms of organizing. I'm not the overseer per se, but we coordinate. I'm like the community organizer in chief, if you will. And so we have a community garden in Brooklyn that was actually bulldozed as a result of real estate development. And in the name of development, as Dr. Patil alluding to earlier in her home country of India, this is a global phenomenon. This is a community garden that was vibrantly productive in terms of building community, in terms of producing food, in terms of being a meaningful place for folks to gather, a meaningful place in their lives. And yet the city saw fit to bulldoze this garden, notwithstanding the community's lifting up of their voices to say, please do not do this. And so later on, I will talk about you know, all the benefits of community gardens and why we need to look at some really substantive issues as far as community gardens contributions. But suffice it to say that because the issues are so in our face, one of the issues that I deal with is youth violence. We actually have an alternatives to incarceration program at our youth farm in the Bronx, and because economic violence really redounds in terms of interpersonal violence. And so, again, the community gardens provide a green environment. A green environment has been copiously researched as being places of attenuation of aggression. So I'll just leave it at that, but we just have a very strong sense of incumbency, moral incumbency. Justice, I'll just finish by saying this. We're talking about climate justice, environmental justice, social justice. Really, the term justice really speaks to folks taking the initiative to address the harms that are confronting them. And so justice is not, and I want to say that because for communities of color, this is what justice means. It is not an issue of parity, of trying to come up and be equal with somebody. No, we're going to do what is right for us in a way that is culturally resonant and significant, and that at the end of the day, we feel that our community is thriving.
Great, thank you. So the next question is actually for Juan Pedro. And I wanted to ask you, Juan, you are a longtime union leader and a champion of workers and worker rights. How has organized labor in Peru and in Latin America more broadly engaged with climate crisis?
Los sindicatos en el Perú estamos incorporando el tema del cambio climático y del desarrollo sustentable en la agenda sindical. La agenda sindical no tenía, como no tiene a nivel de muchos países del mundo, el tema del cambio climático y de las luchas ambientales como parte de la lucha sindical.
The unions in Peru have started recently inserting climate change as an issue within their own agendas. Historically in Latin America, this hasn't been the case for climate change or environmental struggles, but part of my work has to do with working on starting climate change on this agenda.
Nuestra central, en su congreso estatutario desarrollado hace un año, ha incorporado en el estatuto y en el programa la lucha sindical por desarrollo sustentable con trabajo decente y el buen vivir.
The union I'm a part of and I'm a leader of, in its Congress last year has adopted a resolution that includes fighting for fair jobs, sustainable development, and simple living, o buen vivir.
Actualmente, en el marco de la preparación de la Cumbre de los Pueblos y aprovechando que la COP20 está sensibilizando medios de comunicación y llega a los trabajadores,
currently, in the context of organizing this Climate People Summit, in the context of the upcoming UN climate negotiations in Lima, this has allowed for sensitizing and creating awareness among the population and labor.
En ese contexto estamos desarrollando educación ambiental y sobre cambio climático, y nuestro objetivo es llegar a incorporar cláusulas ambientales y de cambio climático en la negociación colectiva.
And in this context, we're developing objectives to insert climate education and environmental education in the collective agreements that we have.
Este objetivo de cláusulas ambientales en la negociación colectiva es difícil, pero es muy importante y muy necesario porque estamos en un país en el que los derechos laborales y los derechos ambientales no cubren los estándares internacionales.
And this is very important for us because in the context of my country, within these collective agreements, labor rights and even environmental rights do not meet international standards.
Y porque además las actividades laborales de los sectores económicos, pesquería, minería, son los que más afectan al cambio climático y más contaminan el ambiente en nuestro país. Esa es la razón por la cual los sindicatos estamos trabajando en luchas ambientales y el pueblo peruano está desarrollando en estos momentos varios conflictos socioambientales y sociolaborales.
And part of the labor unions also include mining unions and fishing unions, which also have an impact on climate change. So we're working very hard to bring these unions as well and try and develop different clauses that will help us fight all these environmental fights.
Finalmente, Faron, unos segundos para pedir a si entre los presentes está algún activista que coordina con comunidades de peruanos, estamos buscando contactos para convocarlos. El día de mañana voy a estar en Paterson, ya hay unos contactos y reuniones. Quisiéramos, si alguno de ustedes está con nosotros, tiene contactos para convocarlos a la marcha para este domingo.
Finally, Faron, just a few seconds. I would like to ask the audience if any of you has contacts with Peruvian communities in the New York City area. I'm looking to also connect with these communities. I have some contacts already, and I'm heading to Paterson, New Jersey tomorrow. But if you can, please reach out to me.
Wonderful, thanks. So the next question is for Thanu. So the NYIC represents a broad spectrum of immigrant organizations across New York State. And I was hoping you could talk about how immigration and migration are pertinent to the fight around climate change.
Do I have 20 minutes or 3?
You got 2.5.
Okay, so I'm gonna try and, oh my gosh, I'm gonna try and do this in 3 minutes, and I'm gonna try and talk about this in terms of the international level, the national level, and the local level. You guys better applaud afterwards. So firstly, I mean, migration is obviously a global issue. There's statistics from the International Migration Organization that says that by 2050, over 200 million people will be displaced because of climate change and environmental shifts. And already this is happening in countries like Bangladesh. Over 15 million people have already been displaced because of severe flooding. You know, in small island states such as Vanuatu, the Maldives, which is an island state actually close to where I'm from, which is Sri Lanka, is actually one of the first nation states that will actually sink in the next 50 years. And so we're really seeing that climate change is going to be a huge part of why it is that people move. It is today, and it's going to continue to be an issue. So, of course, there's like deep connections between migration and climate change. One thing that I definitely want to note is that when we talk about climate change, and specifically what we're talking about is, you know, things such as like carbon emissions, we're talking about sea level rising, we're talking about droughts and floods. When we talk about CO2 emissions and the reduction of carbon emissions, one thing that's really important to note is that the majority of carbon emissions, actually 72% of carbon emissions, are actually come from countries in the global north, United States, Canada, you know, parts of Europe, and yet the largest impact of climate change are actually people from the global south. And so we really need to also be thinking about the impact that the north is having on countries from the global south, and it is often people from the global south who are migrating to places in the north. So when we think about even immigration in the United States and we think about undocumented people in the US, we really also have to think about why it is that people are migrating. People are migrating also because of environmental causes. You know, for example, when we think about treaties such as US trade treaties such as NAFTA, that's had a severe impact on farmers in places like Mexico. And what that has meant is that the crops that people are growing in global south countries have been shifting, and farmers have basically been losing their livelihoods. And as development and urbanization happens, this means that communities that often were agrarian communities are now having to shift what they're doing. And so you're seeing people move to the United States because their means of livelihood has shifted. And so it's really interesting in my work to be pushing for immigration reform and to be dealing with a lot of backlash from conservative forces, when really we really need to think about the US's impact on why it is that people are migrating. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how to end. Yeah, and so you know, and so today when we really think about immigration to the U.S., and I'm going to speak specifically about the U.S., you know, we can really see the impact of disasters already. So, for example, the Haitian earthquake in 2010, in 2001, the El Salvadorian earthquakes. There was also in 1997, I think, a Hurricane Mitch that really impacted Honduras, and these displaced millions of people. And so one of the ways in which the US has been acting is that they have this thing called temporary protected status. So it actually is a very small mechanism in which people who are impacted by disasters are able to stay in the United States. But what we're finding is that, of course, immigration policy is actually not up to date. And when we're pushing for just and humane immigration policy, we really need to be thinking about how that's going to be connected to the millions of climate refugees that are going to come about in the decades to come. So then on the New York level, you know, I think we were just talking about in terms of community gardens and what's happening in the Bronx. You know, when we think about New York as a place that's also going to be impacted by climate change, Hurricane Sandy is a perfect example. You're seeing that the frontline communities who are impacted by natural disasters in urban areas in the United States are immigrant communities, are low-income communities, are communities of color. And so we really needed to be thinking about, as sea levels rise in places like New York City, actually I think in like 50 years, a lot of Manhattan might actually be underwater. We need to be thinking about how that's going to be impacting low-income communities, and what is our stake as immigrant justice organizations to be working with those communities on that level. I think I'm going to stop there because I can keep going.
Great. So I wanted to come back to this side, and the next question is for Goksen. So I will admit that I'm not fully up to speed on everything going on in Turkey, and I was wondering if you could tell me what is the most urgent issue facing Turkey in regards to climate change, and how grassroots movements are mobilizing to address that issue, and if there have been any successes that we should know about.
I think that you should know about firstly that there are a lot of successes. The success doesn't mean for us to stop completely a project, but it also means that delay the project as long as we can delay that the company gives up the project. And we have a lot of projects on that sense. In Turkey, our biggest problem is the country's coal investments, not only because of climate change, but also because of the health issue. And as we have started to feel the impacts of climate change, actually the agriculture, we had this year a severe drought in Turkey, and agriculture has severely impacted by this issue. I don't know how much you're familiar with the farmer communities, but actually a farmer, we say in Turkey that a farmer has 40 salaries in his whole lifetime. He gets land from his father when he's 25 almost, and he gives land to his children when he's 65 or so on. So if you cannot get one salary, if you're working in a company, if you cannot get one salary, you might survive. But if a farmer cannot get one salary, it becomes a big problem in his lifetime, in his revenue. So actually, in our communities, the agricultural communities started to feel the impacts of climate change. And besides, as an addition to this, in most of the places where the fishery and the agricultural activities are very important, we have 80 coal projects. And the people who are fighting against those projects are not the people, the well-educated environmental activists. They are the local people, farmers, fishermen. And those people are winning, actually. For example, maybe you have heard about the Gerze example. It took 5 years. They occupied the place. They didn't let the company to enter to the city for 5 years. Every time company tried to get into the city, they attacked. There was an emergency call line between all the villagers. Actually, everyone was calling to the others, and they were getting into the entrance of the village, and they were stopping the project. This is, for example, one of the examples that we can share. But there are lots of examples like this, that the villagers and the fishermen at local level fighting, they don't call it climate change. They say that something is changing. We didn't feel this kind of drought before, because they have their own booklets that they know which storm will come. And so they feel that something is changing, and they say that to stop this change, we have to stop all those coal projects. And they're doing it in their own language, at the local level, by their own forces. But we should, I think, underline that we are winning, actually, at the local level, the issues. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. It's really inspiring to hear stories of ordinary folks who are normally marginalized from how these processes play out and are not generally thought of as the front of the debate, really taking control and winning, as you said. So that is great. So I wanted to go to the end, and the next question is for Diana. So you have provided training on safety and health issues to immigrant workers after Hurricane Sandy. And I was hoping if you could describe the work to us and, help us understand what people experienced here and why it was so important.
Well, yes, after Hurricane Sandy, we know the spirit. We went out the street because we knew any problem, any catastrophe is impact our communities. And We went out the street and we worked with day labor workers. Some of the corners in New Jersey disappeared. That means they were covered by water, so the workers, they didn't know where to go. So we were trying to find workers in different towns and different places. And we went to basements. Our communities lives in basement because the rent is cheaper there, so it's where they can afford, and we know there are families living there. Our mission was basically trying to locate where people in our community were, what they were doing, and how we can come together to see how to respond. So what we noticed is people was already working, people was already helped. And people was there and say, I want to help. I see people, we don't have nothing, but they lost so much. We lost so little, but they lost so much. They refer to other communities that they have more than we have. So we also start notice that people were abused. They were start working in a very bad condition, with no mask, no gloves. They were cleaning basement, cleaning places, and also demolition, because a lot of things happening in different, when houses come down. And so we saw a need, and we start basically going outside in the different communities and training people about safety and health, how to prevent hazards at work, for them to know their rights, for them to know how they can respond, for them to know how they can become organized and fight injustice. On top of that, injustice happen with all this Sandy, but they have to fight not only for housing, fighting for the basic needs, but fighting for the rights to work, and fighting for their rights to be protected under the emergency. It's a very complex issue, and it's very sad because it's really, really has been affected, it's still affected our communities. And afterwards, after Hurricane Sandy happened, it's almost a year, and we still see a lot of problems in our communities, but also we still see a lot of hope, and we see how our communities again trying to become together and recover. Even though with the immigration issues, we are basically a community that is targeted and facing detention and deportation.
Thank you. And just on a personal note, going back to, why the march is so important, why this panel is so important, is as a New York City, resident, tri-state resident actually now, I saw the disaster from Sandy, right? My house, we didn't have electricity for 2 weeks. And, we actually got off pretty well compared to other folks. And that sounds like nothing, but when you don't have electricity, when you don't have heat, then you don't have heat, then you can't cook. There was no gas available, so you couldn't really drive anywhere. There were, people just walking around the streets looking for food. There was a state response which actually blocked people from getting aid in oftentimes. A lot of times the government was really the hardest, the biggest opponent to relief efforts. This was my experience. And so, when no, it's true. When I think about, this issue, oftentimes the climate stuff is sort of pie in the sky in a certain way, but it's real when you have to meet it. So the next question is for Isso, and I wanted to ask. I've heard that you've done a lot of work with youth, and I wanted to ask, what is the role of youth in the climate change movement in the Pacific Islands, and how do you address the need for adaptation to urgent changes and simultaneously carry forward the traditional communities and economies?
Thank you. Do we still have the 2 minutes? Okay, so just to make sure that I'm not representing the Faron, I'm representing 15 Pacific Islands, so I'm speaking on behalf of 15 Pacific Islands. So to answer the question, in the Pacific now, where as a young leader in the Pacific, we're trying to mobilize huge to address, not really address the adaptation. We're doing adaptation strategies, but we're really confused of where is the causes of this climate change. So actually now we're mobilizing, to address directly in the national government to, ask, stopping these, some of these coal mining industry factories. So what happened is we came up with the idea of, climate warriors, just to act like climate activism, justice, and we have the right to do these things and directly, getting some traditional tools, some traditional mechanisms just to address some of these big factories in some of these international countries. So our big projects now we're working with is we're trying to, because Australia is one of the 5, I think it's one of the 5 leaders of coal exporting, and because Australia was part of this Pacific Ocean, and because we look to Australia as one of our big, we used to call it one of the big brothers. They're coming into the Pacific. They really love the Pacific. They really love the beautiful islands in the Pacific, and they really want to come and enjoy. So Pacific Islands, Australia shouldn't drown its like the Pacific Ocean, so they shouldn't have expanded coal mining industry. So what we do is we directly peacefully doing some non-violent actions with the Australian government to stop the coal mining industry that expanding. So this is one of the current projects that we're working on. I think next month will be the actual demonstration. So yeah, that's one of the highlights.
Wonderful, thanks. The next question is for Vaishali. And I wanted to know, what are key developments in the Indian movements about climate change that are most inspiring to you and point the way toward future successes?
See, in India, in the rural area, the literacy percentage is very low. People are fighting for their land alienation because the whole process of land grab is taking place. And land is being grabbed on the name of the developmental projects. And people are looking at this whole land grabbing movement more from their livelihood perspective. Because the livelihood of the 70% of the population of India depends on the natural resources, depends on the agriculture. So water, forest, and land are the natural resources, and the whole movement of the marginalized section of the society is to have the community rights on these natural resources. And to assert the community rights on these natural resources is the climate movement in India. And 2005, in Jaitapur, where the largest nuclear power plant is proposed, the compulsory land acquisition started by the government in India in Maharashtra state, where we have the act, because the state is the ultimate owner of the land. So state can decide what is the public interest. And if it is declared for the public interest, the state has a right of snatching your land. And the farmers fought against this snatching this land grab on the name of the nuclear power project. And from 2005 till 2014, the people of Jaitapur area have not allowed the nuclear power plant to come up. That is one. Second thing, in the whole Western Ghat, there are more than 30 local self-government passed the resolution saying that their area should be declared as a eco-sensitive zones. And this area, the UNESCO should declare as a World Environmental Heritage. And this is what people's demand has been. And there had been a moratorium from 2009 till almost 13-14, where in certain part of the Western Ghat, coal and the mining projects, thermal and the mining projects have been put moratorium. But with the new government, again the challenges is very serious because our Prime Minister says that climate doesn't need to change. There is no question of climate change. People need to change. And this is what his statement is. So people think now we need to change the government more than anything else. And that's it.
Thank you. So the next question is for Carolina. And the question is, Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, proved that LES, that's the Lower East Side of New York, is a community that's been at the forefront of climate change. And whether it's another big catastrophic storm or just what we see coming in rising sea levels, it's very likely that the LES will face further climate destruction. I was just seeing something in Time magazine about sea levels basically potentially wiping out LES, and that this stuff is coming. And I wanted to know, how are people in the community preparing for that? And in what ways are people engaging with work that will protect their homes and their neighborhood and actually make political points around climate change?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that as a community, we're very lucky to have multiple organizations. We have a lot of settlement houses, and what we realized after Sandy was that we needed to step up, not just what we were doing in terms of preparing for a disaster, but really working together. Because there's about 172,000 residents in the Lower East Side, and even though we're all doing work to empower low-income families, we realized that when Sandy hit, we really weren't prepared, and we were actually working in very separate kind of silos. So we decided to form a coalition, and that's called LES Ready, and that's been working really, really hard to develop a plan and also prepare people individually. So that's more organizationally with the community in terms of how we're really trying to build this disaster prep network. So what people are doing individually is, I think that the first thing is education, right? So we're trying to bring them information. And many times, we have we have a very diverse community still, even though it's changing. And that's been pretty difficult considering the extremes in terms of income that exist in our community. So we have kind of like the very rich and then the kind of very low income. And what we do every day is try to empower these low income tenants and residents. So I would say that for individuals, it's really kind of the individual preparedness. So it's not just, knowing where to go or getting your go bag. Most people are going to shelter in place anyway. So what are we going to do to prepare there in our homes? And the other thing is that for a neighborhood that already has a history, and actually a very recent history, of telling people that they can go and then they can return, and then actually decades later never being allowed to return, you already have this thought and you have this fear that as soon as I leave my home, I'm probably not going to be let back in. So you know what, I'm going to stay and I'm going to wait. So what we figured is we have to give people some tools. You have the information, you know where to go, and you know how to really shelter in place or find that family member and really develop your own plan. And then work with us, work with goals, work with your community-based organization. I think how we're trying to engage some of the residents the best way in terms of preparing our community as a whole, because we are on the water, it is waterfront, most of it is public housing. So these are a very kind of marginalized, disenfranchised community, people of color, a lot of people whose English is a second language, is really trying to just fight to be recognized, because we've already, Sandy was kind of a reminder that low-income communities are constantly overlooked, right? So it wasn't just the LES, it was the South Bronx, it was Red Hook, these neighborhoods where there are people of color. So it's really working and kind of figuring out the best political move. So you have funding that's coming in. You have things like New York Rising, which was actually an initiative put forward by Governor Cuomo. So they decided that they were going to fund hard-hit communities, but they decided that hard-hit community was only up to Chambers Street. And that's really not reaching the whole island or the people that were really affected. So what did we have to do? We had to fight just to be recognized as a community that's that's on the water that was severely affected. And then there's other initiatives like things like Rebuild by Design, where you have funding coming in, it's a competition, it's a way to really build a more resilient community. So who are we going to let build this, prepared community? Are we gonna let a government agency do it? No, we're gonna actually have residents there. So we just hit the pavement, just like we did in Sandy. In Sandy, we were very lucky to have 3,000 volunteers come in front of our very tiny storefront, and then we knocked on 15,000 doors. So that was a moment to realize that we don't have a plan. We need to do some serious assessment. We need to make sure that we're not kind of doing extra work or doubling up or neglecting certain buildings. And then we need to work with, some political, some representatives and be very clear that we know that we have the power to, in some ways, kind of make a political threat. Like, you have to be really honest about it and say, hey, these are potentially 170,000 voters. So we're gonna work really hard. We're gonna develop a plan inside our homes, with our communities, with our buildings, and just keep going and keep the information, keep the education going, and just, marching, right? Marching, rallying, occupying, doing all the things that we do as community organizers, but keep it moving, because environmental justice, like I said, and like everyone here has pointed out, is prevalent in all of these areas. So it's all very related, and it's just getting that message across and really reaching as many people as possible and being realistic and trying to be as optimistic as possible.
Right.
I hope I answered your question.
You did. And that was great examples of great work. In fact, you can put me on your email or listserv or yes, absolutely. So the last question from me to the panel is for Amanda. And I just wanted to ask, how can immigrant advocates, medical advocates, and medical advocates work more closely with environmental advocates to elevate both issues and make some concrete policy shifts for the betterment of the planet?
In the interest of time, I'm going to keep it really quick.
Thank
you. Really short. And from also speaking from a personal organizational level and from a US stance, how we came together directly with environmental activists was in the big question was, well, where's the money? Who's going to pay for all these plans that we have in terms of climate change, as well as immigration, sustainable jobs, education, and healthcare. And we came together under the campaign of the Robin Hood tax. I don't know how many people have heard about this tax. It began in England in the early 2000s, and the campaign in the US was launched in 2011. And I have to tell you that the African Services is an endorser, but among the list of endorsers, it really goes across the board and brings together all of these people, that you mentioned. We have the National Alliance of Latino and Caribbean Communities. We have AFL-CIO. We have National Nurses Union. We have Friends of the Earth. We have Greenpeace. We have Communities for Change. This is a bill that's actually in the House. Congressman Ellison has brought this bill forward. It has a number of sponsors. But I really do urge you, those of you based here in the US, to go to the website, robinhoodtax.org. There is a petition. Talk about it, learn about it. It's a way that, it's an idea that to tax Wall Street. I don't know, need to go into the details about...
Well, can you say the website again?
robinhoodtax.org.
Robinhoodtax.org.
It's a small tax, a 0.1% tax on Wall Street trading, derivatives. It's not taxes. It's a tax on Wall Street, not a tax on the people. It's a tax on high trading. Thank you very much. High frequency trading, and what is set to generate? It's been endorsed by leading economists around the world, as well as the Pope and a number of faith leaders. It will raise $350 billion a year. Billion, not million, $350 billion a year for a minute tax on Wall Street, a tax that Wall Street doesn't pay, but we all pay taxes on everything that we use. Wall Street doesn't have to pay a tax. This is a way to generate that money and to do the work that we know needs to be done. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. So we're going to have a little bit of a shift in the agenda, and I'm just going to mix in the questions from the audience and questions that the panelists can ask each other. So I'm going to start with the question that came from our audience. And what we're going to try to do is keep it down to one answer because there's a lot of, or one response from the panel. If you feel really compelled, you know, let me know. But I would ask folks to try to get one so that we can get all of these questions because I read over them and they're pretty good. So the first one, and this is from the audience, is asthma and other related health issues are at crisis levels in the U.S., as Ray mentioned. Is this the case in your country? And if so, how is public health work linked to your work on climate change? So I guess this is for our international folks. So how are asthma and other health-related issues, you know, is that prevalent? What are they, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, we can see the health-related problem connected with the climate change very well. Like in the parts of India wherever there is a mining, we see that this particular section of the people are having a lot of problems, and many researches have been done on that. But these issues are not really when people are fighting against mining, the coal mining, the iron ore mining, fracking. So, but it doesn't come as directly as a health issue to the people. In India, all the fight is really connected with the fight for the livelihood, fight for the survival, fight for the natural resources, fight for the rights on the natural resources. But we see a very clear links with the health issues and the climate issues in this.
Okay, great, thanks. So the second question from the audience is, displacement is something everyone has mentioned, whether by storms, development, pollution, or corporate land grabs. What are the best strategies to ensure that we have the right to remain? Ray?
This is, thank you for that question, because we're talking about people moving and getting organized to realize changes in policy. I want to suggest to all of you that an area that receives very, very little attention, Dr. Patil, you actually alluded to it in your remarks when you said, well, the folks are mobilizing, in Turkey they're mobilizing, but you said, Dr. Patil, that we got to get to the government. What is not really talked about so much is actually governance. Now, that is to say the structure of governance. The reason why I'm harping on that is that we in the community gardening movement, in the urban farming movement, in the food is a human right movement, we have been pushing for people's human right to grow their food in a way that is ecologically sustainable and promotes community resilience in the wake of extreme weather emergencies. And, you know, things that are very intuitively make a lot of sense. Yet, when in one case, a community garden in Coney Island was actually bulldozed. So what we had to do was file a lawsuit. I'm going to just mention, I'm going to rattle through a few reforms. One of the things is that there's a concept in law, in common law, that is millennia, ages old. It's called the public trust doctrine. We have sued the City of New York, the Community Garden Coalition, along with sister organizations, on the basis of the public trust doctrine, which says people have a right to land, have a right to water, have a right to air. especially if they've been, you know, engaging in a way that is also sustainable of those natural resources. There is a right. Mother Earth has a right. Her children have a right. And it's a legal right, and it's being, the public trust doctrine is a legal instrument that can be used. So I just wanted to suggest that. In terms of governance, I need to rattle through this very, very quickly. Here in New York City, we have community boards. And that's where folks come together. And in the case of this community garden in Brooklyn, people said, stop, no development, yet, and the community board voted to do that. Guess what? As it goes up the decision-making chain, that community board vote is considered advisory. It's as if working class communities of color, we're children. We're here to play house. That is paternalism. That is racism with a velvet glove. It is unacceptable. You know, that we come together and we're considered, our vote is considered advisory. As you move up in New York City, and I'm saying this so that you can maybe think of the analogs across in your, so there's a planning commission. There are city planning commission. The planning commission's vote is obviously binding. The Planning Commission is made up of 100% real estate developers. The Planning Commission here in New York City oversees environmental review. That is to say, what is the environmental impact of this development project on a local community? The these might as well be called the Real Estate Development Commission, not the City Planning Commission, because what they're doing, they voted against it. Now, when you also look at that, the Climate Commission here in New York City is also the Coastal Commission. And they decided to take away a community garden that actually acts as a natural sponge when there is stormwater runoff, helps to mitigate stormwater runoff, and in so doing, it's a form of green infrastructure that keeps our aging sewer system from being overwhelmed. Well, conflict of interest there. The other thing that's going on is that there's no zoning. So we have to look at zoning. There's no zoning for community gardens. Community gardens, and just rattle this through, air filtration, heat island mitigation, stormwater runoff mitigation, carbon sequestration, bioremediation, and phytoremediation of distressed soils, not to mention decentralized food production. That's a really key factor here because we have the world's largest food distribution system here in New York City, and it's not sustainable. It almost went underwater with Sandy. And what we need, community gardens, we need to develop neighborhood-based capacities for food-based resiliency where food is being produced on rooftop gardens. We're not just talking about gardens on the ground level. We're talking about rooftop gardens. As you know, rooftop green roofs reduce heat in the summer, and so they cool the buildings in the summer, and they heat the buildings in the winter, therefore reducing our carbon dependence on carbon. So we need to look at that. The other thing that I'll just say, and I'll finish off with this, community board meetings are held in the evening when we can get here, like you all were able to get here from your day jobs and whatever, but the planning commission meetings happen during the day when professionals come together in their suits and their air conditioning. So we're saying, we're pushing for these reforms where if you're gonna make and planning commission are appointed, they're not elected. How outrageous is that? And so we need to have, if these people are who are appointed, not elected by the people, making decisions that have such consequence for the people, those votes need to happen in the evening when the people can get there. And the same thing with city council. So I just engage in that to say that you have to look at the level of governance because governance has a default effect on the trajectory of policymaking. We can push policy and it can be all lovely and sound really good, but if we don't look at, the other thing I might say that if we have real estate developers, why not get a community gardener on the planning commission? Why not get an environmentalist on the planning commission? So we're talking about a more participatory form of government.
Great.
So I just wanted to suggest that.
Yeah.
Need the mic, I don't think, but I just wanted to add that I agree. I mean, in a place where gardens are a part of the culture and the history of kind of Lower East Side, I think it's really important that we have to not only push policy and some zoning changes, but try to think about really kind of clever out-the-box thinking, like, you know, neighborhood garden districts. Those are some ideas. Cultural preservation districts, something to really preserve the neighborhood and the community as is, especially when it's green spaces that are going to soak up kind of these storm surges that are going to continue to happen. The other thing is, in terms of development, all this irresponsible development, you can't allow people to bypass this process, which they can, especially on stuff like on NYCHA and public housing. You can bypass the ULURP process, which is the Uniform Land Use Review process, and go ahead and build on NYCHA property. And they're actually able to do that without a real environmental impact study, and that is unacceptable as well. You cannot plan on building units, thousands and thousands of units on weak sewage infrastructure, on an aging electrical grid, without really assessing the environmental impact of that community. And that's also a policy change that I think we all need to push for.
Thank you. So now I wanted to actually take a question from the panel to the panel, because part of this is we'd like to encourage folks to learn from each other and build connections. So is there anybody on our panel who would like to ask a question to another panelist? Go on. The microphone, please.
Hi, this is a question for Isso. That's your name, right? So yesterday I got like really obsessed with like reading about small island states and the impact of sea level rising, and and I was reading about like places like Kiribati and other islands who are basically looking to buy land in places like Australia in order to move entire migration, entire populations. And I'm wondering if that's happening in Vanuatu, and how is Vanuatu really thinking about the long-term consequences of sea level rising?
Yeah, actually now, our government is taking serious responses to the climate change, especially sea level rise. So what we're doing now is we're giving more, educating more people in the local communities just to be more aware of the, sea level rise and the other impacts as well. So what we're doing now is we're putting more adaptation strategy in the coastal areas just to protect or minimize some of these impacts of sea level rise, especially coastal erosion is one big major issues. So I think now the government is taking priority for climate change adaptation. So in our own country, we just set up what we call the NAP, which is the National Advisory Board on Climate Change Adaptation and Disaster Risk Reduction, just to targetedly mainly address the issue of sea level rise and also some of the other major issues in the country. So in terms of Pacific, like the other Pacific islands, I think the government is now taking the other initiative, not just like in the terms of adaptation, but taking some other, looking for some other places to relocate. And this is, it's really some of the differences from our own country, Melanesians, and to the Polynesian countries, and also with the Micronesian countries. I hope I answer your questions.
All right, the next question is from the audience, and I think it's a great one. The question is, how do you envision a green economy in the future? It is a big question, and this is the largest marching climate in the history of the country, of the world, sorry. So, big answer.
No capitalism.
Would you repeat that, please?
I said no capitalism.
Okay.
Robin Hood tax passed in the U.S.
Can you say that one more time?
A Robin Hood tax passed in the U.S. to fund it.
I will say something much more international, I think. I think that we shouldn't think just a green economy. I think we should think how we can live all together in this planet. So just thinking about economy just makes us think again about the green development policies and so on. So it puts us again in the same dilemma. And we should start thinking a little bit outside of this dilemma, actually. We should learn how we can live all together, share all resources, actually. Yesterday in a meeting, someone was saying, actually, in the Philippines, with our natural resources, we can live, I don't know, I might say the numbers wrong, but 2 million people, but we are very much less than this, and we cannot live. Most of our population lives with less than $2 in a day. So I think that we shouldn't think about the economy, because when we think about the economy, we think about the green economy, and then we start thinking about the green development policies and so on. So we should start thinking about, we have actually this planet Earth, and at the end of August, we are ending all that year's natural resources that we can consume for that year. So we are finishing our Earth's natural resources much more faster than we should do. So we should start thinking in a different way. We should start how we can live in a harmony with the nature, how we can reconsider ourselves as a part of this nature. That's my idea.
And I actually think that was a big question, and I kind of like what was happening right there on the panel. So I'm going to take some facilitator's privilege to just ask if people have a 2 to 3 word answer for that question, and we'll just go right down the line. So can we start here? When you can go.
Can I start?
Yeah, so just 2 to 3 words.
I just want to say 3 words. So to contribute with what Goksen has said is about the green energy and some. So there's a slang that we used to call back in the Pacific Island. It's like you think globally and you act locally. So that's one of the things. Yeah.
Okay, great. Popcorn answers. Quick, small sound bites.
Vote with your green feet.
Okay.
Transición justa para construir un mundo nuevo y sustentable.
A just transition to build a new world that is sustainable.
You know, during the Great Depression, and during World War II, there was something known as Victory Gardens, Depression era relief gardens and Victory Gardens. Those gardens produced 40% of the food that was being consumed in this country, along with whatever was happening with the farms at that time. Why am I mentioning that? Because that was, as it were, a Marshall Plan that said, you know something, if we wrap our heads around this, we can do this. So my 2-word thing though, participatory budgeting. How many of you have heard of it? In the Bronx, this is what we did in the Bronx. We put participatory budgeting is participatory democracy. What it is, we need to get at government, we need to insinuate our presence, good people, Mother Earth loving children here, we need to get in there. We need to be there. Participatory budgeting allows us to vote. In the Bronx, we were able to have the community vote on public city council money, and we were able in the Bronx to move $300,000 for a solar-powered food production greenhouse on public housing land. And so, you know, you're talking about greening the budget, but I'm suggesting that that's just a drop in the bucket, and we also are saying with that capital infusion, also coordinate so that you have workforce development, so that the local community is involved in building the solar power greenhouses being funded. So it's to coordinate a policy of workforce development along with capital investments, but participatory budgeting where the people decide where their tax dollars and how, not deferring to an elected official, but they decide directly how their money should be spent.
I would just say that global connectivity requires accountability.
My grandfather was an indigenous Chibcha, so I have something of that. So I will say we really need to see our indigenous community, the appreciation for life and for Mother Earth, really, not just a mantra, but really see that and ask for permission to her where should be built. Because we are really not respect her, and it's why we're building where we should not be building, and we are destroying her. So we need to build in a sustainable communities and have more appreciate for the simplicity of life and the richness of people is people. No richness of people is just people that have things. So I can see a world where we can all get back together to that inner indigenous person in all of us and get connected and discover us as a human beings and ask for questions to her.
I was going to say reduce, reuse, recycle. But I guess, yeah, right, it's still cool. I guess, though, I would say set more precedent. You know, every time someone says we've never done it before, or it can't be done, or where we're going to get the money for that, it doesn't matter if it hasn't been done before. Everything has to be done for the first time. So set more precedent. And then if people ask how, then you just tell them figure it out. And also you should recycle.
Great. So I'm going to ask the last question, and I want to do it the same way. You know, folks don't have to give 3 words, but, you know, you don't have to read the thesis either. So the question is from the audience, and it is, destruction of the environment is very closely tied to cultural destruction and imperialism. How do you build a climate movement that doesn't further alienate communities of color, but instead allows for autonomy? So, autonomy, right? So I guess since we started this side, we'll start.
All right, wait, repeat the question.
Okay. Destruction of the environment is very closely tied to cultural destruction and imperialism. How do you build a climate movement that doesn't further alienate communities of color, but instead allows for autonomy?
I think that you would probably have to, you know, try to, I think that one of the hardest parts of community organizing is really making that connection with people. Like a lot of us have said, people are worried about, you know, picking your kids up from school, or, you know, getting your next check, or all of these things that you do every single day. So I think to really connect with people, especially low-income people, you just have to be really honest about how it's related, even the littlest things. So we always tell people, you know, you start in your home, and then you move to the building, and then you move to the block, and then you move to the neighborhood, and then you move to the city. So that's where I try to start anyway, is right in my own home. So I think that in order to identify, just be really open-minded and be culturally sensitive, because there's so many people, so many diverse groups out there that you could learn from, and really let them know that they do have a voice, and that we can really, we have people power. I mean, the other side's got a lot of money, but, you know, we have a lot of people power, and we really need to stand together and be united, and really just to make change. We have to just stand together and shout, and that's how we're going to be heard. And then occupy something at least once.
Human rights for us is coming from Latin America, and when somebody say about displacement, that was my first thought. See myself immigrate and come back to my country, immigrate for political reasons and come back just 2 years ago after 20 years to see nothing there. So human rights, when I came here, I see people working in issues, housing, education. So the capitalist system is about specialized, so we get ourselves specialized in education, specialized in immigrants, specialized in food, specialized in this and that. And we don't see how every single thing are connected, because we are humans, and one human being have all those basic needs. So if we really see more the connection between the human rights and see how we are connected for all the issues we're working on, and not really be independent, and see us more and more appreciate the fact that we are all are human beings, that I think helping us to build in a movement, because those because those human beings, we need a place to live. We need a sacred place to live. So that is how we can fight all together and building a movement about climate, because this is our air, this is our space. And we need to embrace and love her. And we really need to come together as a brothers and sisters, human brothers and sisters. And that is the way I see we can come together.
I just think that it's important for all of us to really think about what's at stake. And that's always the question that we should be asking ourselves. What's at stake if we, don't recycle? What's at stake if we are burning garbage? What's at stake if we are overfishing our seas? And I think that there's this way in which, I'm from Sri Lanka. In my community, there's like certain things that we do, for example, and we'll be like, okay, well, it's traditional. That's just how we do it, and we really need to divorce this idea of like culture as like a static thing. Culture is like ever changing, and we can always like do things better. An example I think would be from the food justice movement. In low-income communities and communities of color. In New York, I see all of these like food deserts. You'll go to places in the South Bronx or parts of Brooklyn, and there will not be like one good grocery store, and that impacts what it is that people eat, and that impacts what culturally people think that they eat, and then people think that they don't deserve to eat good food. And so a way in shifting that is really talking about environmental racism, talking about food justice, and talking about racial justice as connected to what it is that we deserve from our environment, and what it is that our cultures deserve in order to thrive.
Well, in the food justice movement, we say food sovereignty. We are children of the Almighty. We are children of Mother Earth. We're endowed with a level of dignity that is inviolate. I agree with my colleague all the way on the left from Goals, meeting people where folks are at. What we've been doing in our community. I'm very apt to say sustainability with dignity. This is what community gardens represent. As I said earlier, it allows folks to be productively engaged, particularly in a community that is unemployed and in poverty, where food stamps never make it to the end of the month, and they're being cut already by the government. And here's a way for folks to be productively engaged in a way that is self-determining, in a way that honors their sense of human dignity. Sustainability with dignity. We say, we're talking about the little islands that are disappearing. There's an island right here in New York City that's definitely going to disappear, and it's called Rikers Island. And we because of the prison industrial complex and the new Jim Crow and the mass incarceration of youth of color, we are disproportionately represented in Rikers Island. And y'all remember what happened with Katrina, right? They were drowning in sewage in the prisons. They couldn't get out. They were trapped. So, this is how we do when we're organizing in our community. We say, listen, Katrina, this is what happened. Bloomberg, when he was mayor, he was saying nobody's getting out. They're spending like $60 million now, quiet as it's kept, on retrofits at Rikers Island. We don't know for what, actually. But, that's how we organize. We also talk about public housing and say, remember Sandy, because our elders were stuck up, in the no heat, no hot water, no food, no medicine. And so we say, remember Sandy. And this is how, so meeting people where folks are at is definitely what we do. And then, it's the most beautiful thing to work at the most local level. That's how come every day a community garden is a place where people can go. We give food out to the drug dealers. We give food out to the gang leaders, to folks. And guess what? There's a reciprocal relationship that when, we need people to come out and sign a petition, and to vote, in support of green initiatives, well, let's say, yes, we know Ray. We know what they're doing in this urban youth farm. He's doing things for these youth. He's doing things for the community. So at the most local level, the local is, yes, they said the global is the local. So said that. And so I definitely agree. We build locally. We are the leaders we're looking for.
Los pueblos del mundo tienen identidad, cultura, territorio, costumbres, formas de alimentarse, formas de producir. Y todo eso está siendo afectado, todo eso está siendo impactado por cambio climático.
Peoples of the world have their own identity, their own culture, their own traditions, and all of that it's been affected by climate change.
Y están siendo impactados porque el cambio climático es parte de un modelo de producción, parte de un modelo económico que tiene que cambiar.
And these peoples are being impacted by climate change because they're part of a production system, an economic system that has to change.
Por eso nosotros, desde los sindicatos y desde la Cumbre de los Pueblos del Perú,
Because of that, the unions and the People's Summit that's been organized in Peru,
estamos luchando porque los derechos ambientales se incorporen en el marco de los derechos humanos y fundamentales, es decir, derechos económicos, derechos sociales, derechos culturales y derechos ambientales. Todos juntos, todos transversales, todos estos derechos son parte de la vida y son motivo de la movilización y de la lucha que estamos desarrollando.
and that, and that is why we're trying to insert these environmental rights into the bigger framework of economic rights, labor rights, and many other rights, because all of this together encompass, like the solutions that we need, and that's why we're also like inserting them into the People's Summit that we're organizing.
Es en este marco como los derechos culturales y ambientales forman parte del sentimiento y del corazón de los pueblos y de esa gente que es necesario movilizar.
And all of these cultural rights and environmental rights, all of this belong to the sentiment of the people that we also need to mobilize.
Y es importante hablar de cultura y de sentimientos en un escenario como este, en el que los migrantes tienen o tenemos mitad de sentimiento, mitad de corazón en el país y en la familia de origen, y mitad de sentimiento y de corazón en la perspectiva, en la posibilidad, pero también en los temores del país en el que están como migrantes.
And it's important to talk about these cultural and social sentiments because these are divided in the countries as immigrants that we came from and are also embedded in the perspectives for a future and also fears in the country we live in right now.
Entonces, el reto y la oportunidad de quienes trabajamos contra el cambio climático en el mundo y de quienes trabajan o trabajamos por derechos sociales y laborales de nuestras comunidades migrantes y no migrantes, encontrar las estrategias que unan estos sentimientos, que lleguen al corazón de la gente para movilizarnos este domingo.
And so, sorry about that. So the challenge and the opportunity that we have here is to work on the sentiments and of all of us that work against climate change and on labor rights to find those common strategies to actually mobilize everyone this Sunday.
Thank you. Gracias. So we actually are almost out of time. So I wanted to just ask of the three folks left, could y'all kind of figure out, is there one person who really would like to speak? Because unfortunately, we are running over.
Yes, I think I have one of the best answers here about this, your question. So just to summarize the whole thing, what I want to explain is become a climate change warrior or become a climate change champion and come join the mass and,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, great. Well, since you were so brief, brother, I think if everybody else could be that brief, we can't get through them.
I would say Mother Earth is everybody's. Everybody, all the nature, animals, creation, and each one of us have got equal right on this Mother Earth. Let's try to save our planet. And we are unstoppable. Another world is possible.
All right, you're last.
Yeah.
Make it big.
Yeah, and I will be brief too. So, we are 5 days before the biggest climate march on Earth, and I saw the plan of the march, and actually you see the different groups. You see the scientists with their scientist identity who are there. You see the faith groups, you see the union laborers, you see the immigrant groups, you see a group of global climate ambassadors. So I think that climate movement is started to build that alliance actually between the cultures. And what we need to do, I think we should move this up much more. On Sunday, this Sunday is not the final point. Sunday is not the big point, is one of the biggest points that we are going to continue until we win this movement. Thank you.
All right. So she's right, it's not the final point, but it is quite a big one. So want to remind folks about how historic this is. So the final piece of tonight's agenda is I wanted to introduce Raul Ayala from the Ropavejeros Art Collective, and he's going to talk about the artwork that they've been doing for the march. So Raul?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I am Raul Ayala. I'm from Quito, Ecuador, and we are Ropavejeros Art Collective. We are based in New York City, and we are immigrant workers that are building this city in silent. So that's a thing that we need to change. Our goal is to visualize our struggles and our stories and our skills, building art and public art and sharing our struggles. So that's Ropavejeros, and for the march, we're building this float that is an allegory for our current situation. So it has a tree, that represents nature. It has a nest that represents home. It has birds that represent us as human beings, as immigrants, as people that can, move. And it has different stories in the birds that we collected in our relationships. I'm gonna show you one of the birds that we're gonna have on the march. So.
Anything else you want to say? No. Okay. All right. One more time, a round of applause for all the great artwork. All right, so that concludes our panel. So I just wanted to get another warm round of applause for our panel and thank them for coming from all over the world. I also wanted to remind folks about what I said earlier about 5 people. We got 5 days, right? So remember, does everybody have their 5 people written down? No? All right, why don't y'all write them down right now, because I know when you get home, you're going to want to turn on the TV or the internet or your Gmail. Write down 5 people, right? And don't put the person you're already going with. Don't put who you're riding the train with, right? Put on there someone you might not expect. I'm going to tell you who my 5 people are, okay? The first person is the person I love the most, which is my mom. And she's not an activist, but I learned during the Occupy movement, she worked on Wall Street. And when I first heard about it, I said, I didn't know if she would agree with them or anything like that. And I said, Mom, why don't you come down with me to Occupy Wall Street? And she said, child, I already been there 3 times. So, you know, don't underestimate people, right? So I'm going to ask my mom, my brother, neither of them are particularly political, right? I'm going to ask one person from our organization who would be our, the operations director, sort of like our secretary. I'm going to ask one person randomly on the street tonight and get their contact info, and then I'm going to ask 4 other people online just through Facebook, okay? All right. And listen, I'm not popular at all, so if I can get 5 people, I know y'all look way better than me. So remember, 5 people, right? Because again, this is our chance to make history, right? This is going to be the largest climate mobilization in the history of the world, right? All right? Is that exciting to folks? Right? Are folks pumped up for that? Right? Y'all ready for the largest march in history? Okay. Are y'all ready to march for just and real immigration reform? I can't hear you. I still can't hear you. All right. Si se puede. 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 All right, get home safe, everybody. Thanks again.